I'm Jeff Zarnett, and this is Software Career Growth. And today we're talking about what to do when firefighting an incident. So in today's topic, we're going to cover some 5 important things that I think you should remember and that good practices that you should follow when you are fighting an incident. So the first one is kind of obvious, but I think it does need to be said, and it is don't panic. One of the things that I understand they teach people who are, say, paramedics is, it's the patient's emergency, not your emergency. Right? Your goal is to remain calm, stay focused on solving the problem, do what needs doing, and don't panic too much about it. The situation may be very bad, but for the most part, most people don't work on things that are life and safety critical, and so if the system is down, it's bad for the business, you don't want this, but no one is going to die as a result. One sincerely hopes. Obviously, if things are life and safety critical, then maybe we need to consider things in a slightly different light. But for the most part, don't panic. Panicking and rushing through decisions and trying to fix things as quickly as possible can sometimes make the problem worse. And hopefully you have some time to consider carefully what you want to do and to not panic, because panic doesn't lead to good decision making. So we'll talk about that. And the feeling of panic is less likely to occur if you have a lot of practice with it. If you feel well prepared and confident that you can handle whatever is happening, that makes it much less likely that you're actually going to feel that panic in the situation. But the first time is always going to be a bit challenging. So the second thing is, in my experience, most issues that are caused are the result of a recent code change. And it may be recent in the sense of, okay, as soon as this was deployed, then that's when the problem started, but it might also be recent as in this is a change that somebody made on Friday. Now that it's Monday and we have higher customer volume, we can actually see the problem observed for real as a result of the increase in traffic. So when you see something is going wrong, probably the first guess should be to look at recent changes and try to consider whether they could have been responsible for the problem that you were seeing. And of course, sometimes the problem is kind of indirect, right? Like we made one operation slow and it now causes something else to time out. But looking at those recent changes gives us kind of a good starting point for what's going wrong. It may be unrelated, it may be something that's been there for a long time, in which case, there's not very much that you'll find as a result of the recent changes, but this is a starting place. And if in fact it is one of those recent changes, then the question is, would reverting help? The answer is not always yes. Sometimes what you need to do is go forward instead of go back, right? The problem you have encountered is now we have a null pointer exception that happens in this function, and actually the best solution in this case is just to apply a patch that says, all right, if this is null, skip this and avoid your null pointer exception. But sometimes reverting the change is correct, if you can. Some changes can't easily be reverted, and one possibility is the change that you were talking about includes like a database structure migration where we added a column or we migrated some data from one thing to another, in which case you can't necessarily undo that, or maybe you don't want to. In which case, then your only option realistically is to go forward and can't really go back. So we do have to consider carefully what is supposed to happen in this case, what is the best path to getting things back to a stable state, even if that state is temporary and you'll have to patch it, or you'll have to reapply or re-enable this feature later. But should be very mindful that rollback sounds good, but doesn't always solve the problem. The third thing that I want to talk about is about communication. And communication really has 3 aspects to it. There's the internal part, there's the note-taking part, and then there is the external communication. So internal communication, this is about talking with the other people who are there with you to try to solve the problem. You might need to ask somebody who's an expert in the service that seems to be having the problem. You might need to talk with someone who originally reported the problem. But it's very important, it's very necessary to communicate with people about what's going on. And there's kind of a negative feeling of like, oh, something is wrong, so I don't want to share this. but you should, because if somebody has reported this problem, they're hoping that you will be able to help them solve it. They want your help, and they want to be informed of what's going on, even if it's just, yeah, we're not sure yet, we're still working on it. Because it is very unpleasant to feel like I've reported a serious problem and it's being ignored. Even if it's not being ignored, that still feels bad, right? The lack of communication internally is a problem. And similarly, whoever's been pulled in to help you with firefighting this particular incident, they need to be communicating about what they're doing and what help they need and what resources they need and what theories they're investigating. If we don't have that, there's a lot of confusion, potentially duplication of work or missed items. Somebody forgets to do something that they were supposed to do. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that we are being explicit about what is supposed to happen and who's doing what and what their progress is. There's really no harm in communicating more up to a certain point, right? At some point it ends up being, just drowning out the useful information with the useless information. But err on the side of saying more as opposed to saying less. The next part on the subject of communication is keeping notes. A lot of incidents are not solved just in 3 minutes, and if that's the case, well, it will be helpful later on to take some notes about what you observed, what you tried, what you know, and that will also be helpful in writing the incident report later on. I have another video that talks about incident reports and what they should look like, but yeah, memories fade, especially if you are fighting the incident in the evening, it's after hours and something has gone wrong, and you fix it and you say, I'm going to write the incident report tomorrow, or I'll write it on Monday morning. It's helpful if you keep some notes for yourself to make sure you understand what you did and why you did it, and really help yourself in writing that incident report to flesh out the details about what you did. And the last thing is external communication. And for this, there are integrations you can have, statuspage.io or some other status website, or even just your own status page that you host. Communicating with the customers or the users is actually important. And there can be this urge to keep it a secret, keep it close to the vest, where you don't want to share that there is an incident. Because it, in theory, makes customers somehow have less confidence in you that things are down all the time, why is this the case? However, being honest with them, being transparent is, at least in my opinion, better. I think if you're honest with them, I think if you tell them that this is what's going on, we're working on it, we're working to resolve it, that's a better experience for a customer who notices the outage as compared to somebody who tries to use some functionality and it doesn't work, and then they're like, it doesn't work and I don't know why. But it also helps your colleagues who work in, say, customer support, because if you are showing people, this integration is currently down, we're working on it, they won't get quite as many calls from people saying, hey, I was trying to use this integration and it's not working, could you help me? And helping out your colleagues in support is definitely worth doing, is definitely appreciated. For a pretty negative example of what you should not do and how to not handle the communication side of an incident, there was recently a big downtime from Atlassian. And I think, just my opinion, of course, that they did quite a bit of damage to their reputation and their brand by not communicating with customers about what was going on. Yes, nobody wants to see, there's a big problem and we don't know why, but it's better than failing to acknowledge that there is a problem. And while you're working on the problem, regular updates are still important, even if you don't have that much to say. It's not great to see that this incident has been open for 3 days and there has been no update to it, even if you are still investigating it. You might just take a minute to say, we are continuing to investigate. You don't have to say what theories you've thought of and which ones didn't pan out when you're communicating with the customer. That's a little bit overkill, and you don't really need to be telling them the internal details. But you should be at least saying, yes, we acknowledge that this is still going on, we're continuing to work on it, and our people are aware and working to resolve it. The fourth thing is about delegating. You might be the person who got the page or who noticed the issue at first, but it is definitely necessary to delegate things. Once the company gets to a certain size, once there's enough sort of engineering services and things that you manage, it will not realistically be possible for any one person to be super knowledgeable about everything. And that's okay. But you need to call in people who are, you need to have buy-in from people who write these services that they need to be responsible for their operations, and you should be able to delegate things. But then there are things that it doesn't necessarily require engineering expertise, but somebody should be handling it. And what I just talked about with communicating with the external customers is a pretty good example of that. You don't have to be a senior software engineer who's an expert in the system to be able to write a status page that says, hey, we observe that this integration is not working, and our team is working on it, and we will continue to give you updates as the problem is resolved. Those sorts of things are necessary, they're important, you should be able to delegate them, and delegating them also increases the rate at which you can address the problem, because if there are 3 different theories as to what's causing it and you can now investigate those 3 theories in parallel, that's much better than one person having to do it sequentially. But also, different people have different points of view, different knowledge, different previous experience, so they may think of something that you would not have thought of, and take advantage of that resource. And the last 5th thing that I want to talk about is to remember that you're not alone. That ideally in your organization there are other people who care about making sure that things work. There's probably an escalation path if you are a first responder to bring in more people. There's a way to get the attention of someone who will be able to call in somebody else, and they will be able to call in other people as is necessary. And so you should never feel like you have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign that you are unable to handle the situation. It is part of being a leader who is managing this incident response, and people respect people who make those decisions and bring in the team and put the team together to solve the problem. There's no reason why pride or similar should make you feel like you can't call in other people or that you have to handle it all alone, because it's much better that we work as a team, we solve it together and get it done sooner and perhaps better than one person somehow has to deal with it without that sort of assistance. But this point is definitely hard for people who are new to going on call, this feeling of, well, what if something comes up that I'm not able to handle by myself? And what if I don't have the knowledge? What if I don't have the experience? What if I don't have the access rights for the system in question? That's okay. As long as you have an escalation policy, as long as you can bring in somebody who does, everything's going to work out. So that's it. Those are my 5 suggestions for how to handle an incident. This is pretty high level. As is kind of necessary, I can't necessarily speak to your particular service architecture or your services internal implementations, but I hope this gives you some idea and also some confidence, so that if you do choose to go on call, you have at least a little bit of an idea of, here's what I think I need to know, and here's what I think I'm going to try, at least at a first level. And if you get stuck, you can always call for help. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.